When I think of great thrillers, there are many that come to mind, but few have stayed with me in the way that Denis Villeneuve's 2013 film Prisoners has. The film tracks two main protagonist journeys, Keller Dover, played by Hugh Jackman, and Detective Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, whose paths cross following the disappearance of Dover's daughter and her friend. This film is particularly rich in themes, so today I'm going to break down what makes Prisoners such a haunting film to watch, both through the screenplay itself and through some of the directorial choices made by director Denis Villeneuve. I'd like to start by exploring the title of this film, because there are a variety of ways that we can interpret this. The film has many literal prisoners, from the two young girls taken captive to Alex Jones, who's taken captive by Keller when Keller is led to believe that he is involved in his daughter's kidnapping. But there are also some less obvious examples of who else is a prisoner in this film. Keller Dover himself is a prisoner to his own guilt at not being able to protect his daughter. Keller is a man who prides himself on his ability to be prepared for anything. This is both shown to us visually through his basement full of preparations for disasters, but it is also told to us in the film's opening.
You know the most important thing your granddad ever taught me? Be ready. Hurricane, flood, whatever it ends up being. No more food gets delivered to the grocery store. Gas stations dry up. People just turn on each other, and all of a sudden, all that stands between you and being dead is you.
Keller is clearly a man who's afraid of being out of control, and he's a prisoner to this fear. Before the events of this film, he is seemingly free of this fear, but when his daughter goes missing, that fear finds him again. What scares Keller most is his inability to find a way out of his fears over his daughter's kidnapping. At first, we see him try to attempt to take control of the situation, taking matters into his own hands and capturing Alex following the police's release of him due to a lack of evidence against him. What follows is a brutal torture of Alex in the hope that he will reveal where Keller's daughter and her friend Joy are. But Keller cannot control Alex. No matter how much he tortures him, no matter how brutal and monstrous he becomes, he cannot get an answer. And Keller's willingness to become a monster, to stop a monster, opens some fascinating philosophical questions around morality in the face of evil. Near the end of the film, Holly refers to Keller as a demon when she explains her justifications behind her actions.
Making children disappear is the war we wage with God. Makes people lose their faith. Turns them into demons like you.
And likewise, other characters such as Franklin and Nancy Birch have serious reservations over Keller's actions. Keller seems to stand by the ideal that the ends justify the means. In this case, the end being him finding his daughter and the means being him becoming a monster in order to achieve this. His perspective is continually grounded to his religion through his use of prayer in his moments of despair. He uses it as a way of justifying his actions to himself, a reminder that he is doing this for the greater good. Intriguingly, this film is represented in the film's opening scene, where Keller is teaching his older son Ralph to hunt in the forest. They say the Lord's Prayer before killing the deer. They have a respect for life and for violence and understand that they need to kill the deer for food, but this requires the deer's murder. Keller is a man pushed to the edge by desperation and fear, and this guides his actions. The film continually challenges Keller's actions throughout by adding in new threads to the plot that suggest that Alex is not behind the abduction, such as the introduction of the character of Bob Taylor, whose inclusion in the plot sows further doubt into the audience's mind over Keller's actions, as the plot tries to convince us that he may be behind this. However, the film never fully commits to this because the audience has already heard Alex tell Keller,
They didn't cry until I left them.
What did you say?
So we know that Alex is involved, but the extent to which remains ambiguous for much of the movie. The final swing the movie makes at Keller's actions comes from Holly when she reveals that
Think you should know. Alex never laid a hand on those girls. Just wanted to take them for a ride in a camper. I was the one who decided they should stay.
because it means that Alex played a far smaller role in the abduction than Keller had anticipated. His line, "They only cried when I left them," suddenly shifts meaning. Alex is revealed to have the mind of a 10-year-old, so to him, the reason why he's singing the girls' rendition of Jingle Bells after he's left them is because he likely saw them as nothing more than friends. After all, it was Holly who abducted them. It was Holly who had evil, sickening, malicious intent for them. So whilst torturing Alex did eventually lead to Keller being led in the right direction to Holly's house, the ethical implications of his actions in the process remain highly morally ambiguous given Alex's state of mind and limited involvement. On the other side of this coin is Jake Gyllenhaal's detective Loki, who very much plays things by the book. He's shown to be a good cop and a brave one, from going in first into the RV, not knowing what danger could be in there, to at the very end rushing Anna Dover to hospital whilst he's bleeding from his own head following the shot taken at him by Holly. His willingness to smash open every case to check for the girls despite the snakes crawling out of them. These are all examples of him being this story's white knight figure. However, he isn't perfect, and he does not solve the case. He gets close, but it's ultimately the luck of his boss sending him to inform Holly of her nephew's whereabouts after he finds where Keller kept him prisoner that ultimately guides him to the right place. Unlike Keller, Detective Loki's morality is never really brought into question. However, as already said, whilst his chain of evidence and deduction skills carry him close to finding the girls, they ultimately fall short. Had Keller not have abducted Alex, then Loki never would have found them, and therefore never would have been sent to Holly's home to find her drugging Anna and then being able to rescue Anna. Whereas Keller is able to realise that the girls are in Holly's house, but does so through his brutal methods. This then raises some intriguing questions around the ethics of justice, for if Keller, the man who became a monster to combat other monsters, is able to figure out the case, but Loki, the white knight who remains morally clean, isn't able to solve the case in time, then who is in the right here? The moral greyness of this movie is something left up to the viewer to decide. My own perspective on this film would suggest that the movie presents the argument that both are needed. Loki and Keller very much fit into the idea of the good cop, bad cop. This actually reminds me an awful lot of an element of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, because Batman and Jim Gordon in that movie are the bad cop and good cop, respectively. This is even mentioned by the Joker.
The good cop, bad cop routine?
Not exactly.
In that movie, Batman and Jim have people who they care about, their family. For Bruce, this is his family friend and longtime love interest, Rachel. And for Gordon, this is his actual family. Both are threatened by evil. Batman is the monster in his brutality against the Joker, desperate for answers as to her whereabouts. And whilst the Joker does indeed switch the locations of Harvey Dent and Rachel, had he not have done this, Batman would have gotten to her in time. And in the case of Jim, he is a good cop, he is no monster, and it's why he is powerless when Harvey threatens his family. It's Batman there who is the monster who's able to put a stop to Harvey and save Jim's son by throwing Harvey off a roof to his demise. In that story, the idea of you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain does actually ring true in terms of Batman. He has to break his no-kill rule in order to be a hero, But in the process, one can argue he becomes the villain because he has to become a monster to stop a monster. In relation to prisoners, whilst Keller operates with heroic intentions, he is forced to adopt villain-like traits, never to the level or depths of the evil that we see in Holly, but nevertheless, Keller is not a clear-cut figure of morality. He instead straddles the morally grey area of what is often termed as the anti-hero. The anti-hero archetype lacks many of the conventional qualities of the hero, but remains a figure whose actions are considered morally correct. I'm sure I'm not alone in rooting for Keller being successful at finding his daughter, and I'd be very worried if I was. But he has to become a monster in order to succeed, and we, the audience, are left to question the moral implications of this. Prisoners, then, is a thematically rich film, and that element enables for a top-notch screenplay. However, I don't believe that this is the only factor in what makes this film so powerful and memorable. There are a number of other factors involved in this. Firstly, and perhaps most notably, is the movie's score, composed by Johan Johansson. It's an incredibly eerie score and adds so much to the movie. A notable track is The Candlelight Vigil, which is played through much of the film. It's a particularly eerie track and sets the movie's tone so well. Next are the performances. Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman are some of the best actors of their generation, and both are at some of their very best here. Hugh Jackman does an amazing job playing the desperate, vengeful father, portraying a variety of emotions from sheer rage through to complete emotional breakdown. Jake Gyllenhaal likewise crafts a beautifully believable character in his portrayal of Detective Loki. He demonstrates his heroism alongside showcasing his tortured soul from the depths of evil he stared down in the process of all his investigations. Another notable performance in this film for me was Terrence Howard as Franklin Birch. Whilst only a supporting character as the father of Joy, his role is essential as many of the questions opened around Keller's morality are opened through Franklin's response to Keller's actions. He's stuck between a deep desire to find his daughter and not having the same animosity as Keller to brutalize Alex. Terrence Howard does an exceptional job at playing a man who's at breaking point, and if anyone plans to re-watch or watch this film after this video, take note of the moments where he's in the background of scenes, because there's a few moments where you can tell he's really in character, even when the camera isn't even remotely focused on him at all, which is a very nice touch of his own professionalism as an actor there. However, whilst these elements are essential to what makes this movie so powerful, there is one element above all which I believe to be the key to why this film stays with you, and that is the visuals. This film utilizes legendary Hollywood cinematographer Roger Deakins, who worked with Villeneuve again on Sicario in 2015, and he's also worked on many other movies famed for their cinematography, such as Blade Runner 2049, No Country for Old Men, 1917, The Shawshank Redemption, and Skyfall. This film is beautifully shot. There are so many superb shots that are lit so well. Sometimes I feel the danger with beautiful cinematography can be that if it's too beautiful, it can look like a painting, which for a very dark movie tonally might not fit. But this is an excellent example of cinematography which, whilst beautiful, remains eerie and moody. The movie certainly doesn't lack colour, but colour is muted to a level where it never feels oversaturated or too bright. It feels grungy and depressing, and I particularly like many of the shots in the rain as they fit the mood of this film so well. I briefly touched upon this next element in my Top Gun Maverick video, but I'll explore it in more detail here. This next visual element is, of course, insert shots. These are used to break up a film in the editing process, allowing the audience to pause between scenes. These are particularly needed after a particularly heavy scene, whether it be an emotionally heavy or plot-heavy one. Think of insert shots like pauses in a speech. If you talked really quickly without ever pausing, chances are people would find it difficult to follow. A movie is very much the same. The audience needs those quiet beats between bigger beats in order to stay engaged and not feel overwhelmed and switch off. There's loads of insert shots in all of Denis Villeneuve's films. Dune has them, as does Sicario, and as does this movie. And I'd say the insert shots in this movie are some of his best because they really work for the eerie tone that this film goes for. So many times in horror and thrillers, it's what you don't see which is what creeps people out the most. Think about how sparingly they use the shark in the first Jaws movie, for example. But here, you do see something, but what you see is the ordinary. A tree, a truck, a forest, an RV, a house. But combined with the score and the writing, the ordinary becomes eerie. Not because we're expecting a jump scare, this isn't that kind of movie, but instead because this film is a story about evil lurking in suburbia, in normality, and that's a terrifying idea, and scarily, a very real one. Evil is all around us. It's just that most of the time, it thankfully doesn't involve itself with us, but films like this act as a reminder of the dangers present in society. So these shots are eerie because of how familiar they are to us, and I believe this to be the reason why this movie is so powerful and likely will stay with you, as it has stayed with me. I watched this film for the first time quite a while ago, and before reviewing it, I decided to rewatch it. And what stood out to me most on my rewatch was that even though I'd forgotten elements of the plot, given that it's been a while, what I hadn't forgotten was how this movie made me feel. And I believe that's because of all the elements I've described in this video. And that is why Prisoners is a movie that will always haunt me. So that was my take on Prisoners. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And please do like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Thank you.